Did you give your baby the DPT shot?
Yes, I did.
What is your understanding? Were you obliged to give the baby the DPT shot, or was it a voluntary decision?
A little bit of both, but I think I would have given it to him. I like to protect him against every disease that I can.
Right. At what age was he 6 months when you got when was the first shot?
Oh, I can't remember.
I can't either, I know.
He's had so many. I really can't remember.
Yeah. You're aware that there's some, you know, it's not terrifying enough now to be a parent. They're telling us. You know what I mean?
I'm worried about other things.
Yeah. And they're suggesting that maybe DPT has...
I really didn't know that until we were discussing it right before the show. I didn't know there were so many dangerous side effects.
Okay. Now, we're not going to pretend on this program to solve all of the problems. It is possible that we will make you more anxious than you would have liked to be. It's possible that you'll wish by the time this program is over that you had arrived here on the day we had the male strippers. I mean, that's a lot easier show to handle. So let us make it clear that while we are not claiming to be writing in granite here and there are no Solomons at hand, we do have a professional group of people here who will probably differ on some of the issues about which we will speak, and we ask you to stay with us. As a mother of a 22-month-old person, you may have some more questions. Is she typical, Dr. Mendelson? Robert S. Mendelson, pediatrician? Michael Reese, Chicago, big shot doctor, who's going to come in again and make the entire medical community hysterical because it is suggested you are an overkiller. You come in and say everything about medicine is bad. You have grandchildren?
3 grandchildren.
Have they been immunized?
They have not been immunized.
Nothing?
One child had 1 tetanus shot, but I have to tell you, Phil, that the latest evidence is that the tetanus shot is probably just water, because in reducing the reactivity of the shot, they have also reduced...
Wait a minute.
In reducing the reaction to the shot, the manufacturers have also reduced the capacity of the shot to produce immunity.
They diluted it, you mean?
But the most important thing that was said here today was this lady who said that she didn't know until she came here the dangers of the shots. Because for 40 years now, doctors have not been telling patients the truth. The most important function that your program provides is that we give patients, you give patients, the kind of questions they can put to their doctors. I regard the Donahue Show as the best form of medical education today.
Right. Tell that to the American Academy of Pediatrics. Okay.
Okay, I'm a mother of a 3-year-old that's just starting school, and before I took her to school, they missed a DPT shot somewhere along the line. She was too sick to get it. Right. Bottom line is, they wouldn't let her in school without the DPT shot, which they gave to her like recently. Right. You know, they backlogged it. It wasn't put down, and the schools do not let children in. Ronnie, and they run temperatures from them, and I think that anything that they run a temperature from can't be good.
May I see the DPT graphic, Ronnie? We don't want to insult your intelligence. If you're a caring mother, father, anybody, you know what this is, but let's make sure we know what we're talking about. DPT stands for diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus. Pertussis is whooping cough, and it is the P. Now, Dr. Mendelson wants you to know he doesn't think you ought to take this at all, any of it. None of this alphabet soup he thinks you ought to take. Now, he is not necessarily getting a standing ovation from the American Academy of Pediatrics for that. But let's go back to...
that isn't exactly true.
All right, some agree, I'm sure, but you cannot claim to him.
I have to tell you that next year I've been invited to be the keynote speaker for the American Medical Students Association, and this is exactly what I'm going to say to them.
All right, I'm not saying you're a bad guy. I'm trying to establish that you are, at the very least, a controversial animal, and I don't think you should necessarily apologize for that. It means that you're raising issues about which there's a considerable disagreement. How's that for?
I'm taking the stuff out of the medical journals and trying to lay it before the public.
Let me see that graphic one more time, Ronnie. It is the P, pertussis, about which there appears to be the most controversy. And we'll get into that in a moment. Meet Louis Z. Cooper, M.D., another big shot from the medical community, director of pediatrics, St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, New York City, chairman of the New York chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, has been involved in vaccine research for the last 20 years. And what's your opening shot? No pun, doctor. How do you respond to what's...
Phil, I am grateful that my colleague here gives us a chance to tell this audience how exciting it is to be part of a community where we don't fear polio, where we don't fear measles, where we don't fear rubella, where we don't fear pertussis, the way we did when I was a boy and the way we did when I started medical school. I lived through watching patients die and watching patients be critically and crucially injured for many years with illnesses that now most of this audience don't know anything about except what they read in textbooks. And that's a very happy circumstance, and it's due to vaccines.
But there are a number... All right, here we go. J. Anthony Morris, Ph.D. Dr. Morris has been with us before. Here is the man who said to President Ford and others during the 1976 swine flu epidemic. Remember when the president got his shot in the Oval Office and everybody ran out? Guillain-Barré was just one of the suggested unfortunate reactions that literally hundreds, thousands of people suffered following that immunization program, about which Dr. Morris, who was then with the VA, is that right, FDA?
Food and Drug Administration.
You were with the FDA, disagreed. You should also know that he lost his job, and he is a vaccine researcher. What is your point?
If we make the assumption that what Dr. Cooper said is so, that does not do away with the point raised by that lady. Now, in a recent editorial, in the most recent issue of the State Medical Journal of my state, Maryland, there's an editorial there that says we cannot accept the pertussis vaccine as it now is. That is, that if there's sufficient legislative and public pressure to improve this vaccine, that improvement will take place. So we're not saying that what Dr. Cooper says is not so. What we are saying, it could be better. And the dangers that are associated with the use of pertussis vaccine could be done away with.
What are the dangers?
The dangers are that you might suffer serious neurologic damage. It
causes seizure in some
patients. It causes seizure. It causes the inability to use muscles, as you have in the audience today, Scotty.
As you know, there was a good deal of publicity in Great Britain about immunization, and Fleet Street got on this in the early 70s, and boy, the hysteria, and suddenly Great Britain went from a percentage of 80% of the population. Ronnie, this is on visual 710, if we can just see the graphic on this. From 47 to 74, about 80% of the population of Great Britain was immunized. Then the media got on this thing, and much as the Donahue show is doing now, trying very hard to be responsible, unlike apparently what happened in Britain. And so a significant number of people in the UK backed away from immunization, and guess what? A pertussis epidemic in 1977-78, significant numbers of whooping cough cases, and in 1980, then they got back on it. In 1982, there were 50,000 pertussis cases in the United Kingdom with 12 deaths.
Okay,
that certainly does appear to...
Let me tell you what happened in my state. Following a broadcast by the NBC concerning pertussis vaccine, there was, several months thereafter, a public release from the State Health Department in Maryland saying that there's an outbreak of pertussis in our state. And we believe that this outbreak might have resulted from the reluctance of parents to have their children immunized against pertussis. I got from the State Department of Health the data that they had got off at the computer, which served as the basis of the news release. There was no outbreak of pertussis in the state of Maryland.
Why, Tony?
And the cases that did occur occurred in vaccinated children, for the most part, who had received the vaccine according to the recommended procedure. So they said there were 41 cases of pertussis. They could not have been more than 5 cases of pertussis, and each of these 5 cases occurred in children who had been vaccinated.
You're suggesting that maybe DPT caused them to get whooping cough?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when parents are aware of the dangers associated with pertussis vaccine, this awareness does not result in an outbreak of pertussis because they're aware of the dangers of the vaccine. And that's the impression that the state of Maryland gave.
Okay, meet Marge Grant. Mrs. Grant is the mother of Scott Grant, who is at hand. Scott is 21 years old. These are all polysyllabic words, and I am sure, Mrs. Grant, that it's okay if I proceed to give these folks just a very, very brief And you are saying that, in fact, 21 years ago today, we should say that Scott is, although certainly somewhat limited in his own motor ability and mental capacity, is still a real good boy, and obviously a very good-looking young man who the audience should know has the motor activity development of about a 9-month-old.
Exactly.
And the mental capacity of about
7 years of age in understanding only.
And it was 20 years ago today?
Phil, it's exactly 21 years ago this morning at 5:30 that he reacted severely after his third shot, which was given 12 hours earlier. And the reaction was...
Third shot, the DPT shot?
The DPT, right. It was the third shot he received on the 7th of December, and the following morning around 5:30 he woke up earlier than usual, and I was fixing his breakfast, and all of a sudden he was in his infant seat, and he clenched his fist and his head went back, and he fairly yelled, like as if to say, "I'm falling, catch me." And to this very day, he's very, very sensitive to falling.
All right. Now, you attempted to litigate Scott's case and were not successful. Apparently, your witnesses were not able to convince the judge or the jury of the absolute causality between the DPT and Scott's seizure.
Really, that wasn't the issue at the time of trial. I could not prove that Scott had received Parke-Davis's product, because even though the doctor at the time he administered it told me it was Quadrigen, which was DPT plus polio combined, and it was put out by Parke-Davis, he did not record it on Scott's record.
Oh, I see. So the question, the gray area in the court then, that was not what caused his medical condition, but what brand product
Right,
caused
so
it.
I lost my suit against Parke-Davis. However, we had 5 experts that did indeed treat Scott and see Scott, and they said it was indeed the DPT that hurt him.
You are also proud of the fact that your litigation provoked legislation in the state of Wisconsin which obliges all immunizations now to be identified by lot number and manufacturer.
That's only as of the last year. And that also includes the fact that now we do have a personal conviction waiver. We do not have to take it in the state of Wisconsin, but it was a group of us that petitioned the legislature.
Right. Do you understand Dr. Cooper's point here that as much as we can empathize with the pain and the significant interruption in your own life, family life, in every way that this has caused you, he wants you to know that there are thousands and thousands of people out there who've been spared similar difficulty because of immunology, and that that the numbers indicate that while there are questions, certainly when you inoculate this many millions of people, the thing works. We don't get diphtheria anymore, and there is very little whooping cough, not to mention tetanus.
Well, Phil, I want to just say this. I have done a fair amount of research in the last 21 years, and it proves clearly that the government is at fault. The government has not forced the manufacturer to remove the component that's causing this neurological damage.
Which one is that?
Of the pertussis, the whooping cough component.
You're convinced that it was the P and DPT that caused this problem for your
I have no
son.
question, nor did the experts.
Dr. Cooper, we do have significant medical testimony indicating that the pertussis feature of DPT is a rather unstable mixture of chemistry about which we really know very little, and Dr. Morris wants you to know that he thinks that the pertussis problem really almost disappears after 2 months of age, and you don't give it until the kid is 2 months.
Now, well, I don't know what Tony would say, but pertussis is a problem not just for the 2-month-old, but for children of all ages. It's a bigger problem for the children under a year of age, and one of the reasons we start the vaccine at age 2 months is to try to provide some degree of protection as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I agree with Mrs. Grant that it probably was the pertussis vaccine that caused Scott's awful problem.
Well, then why do we have the P then? And why don't we just sell DT?
Because until we can produce a vaccine which is safer than the one we have,
You think we have to take this
every
risk?
year will be saving hundreds and thousands of lives by using what we've got. We need a better pertussis vaccine, and there has to be more research to help us find a better vaccine. That vaccine has been improved very little in 30 years.
Dr. Mendes.
Well, do you think that doctors should tell patients that I'm going to give you the whooping cough vaccine, and if I give it to you, you might turn out to be like Scott with encephalopathy and mental retardation and cerebral palsy and convulsions and a shock-like state. Do you think that doctors should be telling that to patients, or should doctors be hiding that from patients as they've done for 40 years?
Bob, I don't think doctors should hide anything.
Well, then you
from
tell
their
me,
patients.
why haven't they been telling that to patients? Why is it that this audience here...
The first woman who stood up said she was not aware of any problem.
And now that information is available, but people can't go to medical journals, although if they want, they can read Toni Morris's publications, they can read my publications.
The other part of
There's
that,
a
though,
lot of
Dr.
things they can
Mendelson, is,
read.
I mean, how would you like to be the mother in the pediatrician's office after he says, now, we had the DPT I recommended because we really diminished, but you should also know, and then he takes out a poster of a child in a wheelchair who's got a mental capacity of 7 years at age 21. I mean, what kind of a blackmail is that?
Well, then if I'm the mother or the father, then I have to ask the pediatrician some questions. I have to say to him, what is the incidence of these reactions? And the pediatrician will then say, it's 1 in a million. And then you say to the pediatrician, oh, but Dr. Mendelson has shown me evidence from the medical journals that turns out to prove that the incidence of convulsions is 1 in 100. The incidence of severe mental permanent defect is 1 in 1,000. And that information is in the medical journals.
Yeah.
The only problem is the American doctors don't report it because they're so afraid of malpractice suits. But if you go to the foreign literature, which is now appearing in all the law cases, because now just like your case, there are now hundreds of law cases wending their way through the court.
Bob, come on.
All right, hang on just a second. Let's get this in. Sweden no longer obliges parents to administer DPT shots, right? Sweden is off. West Germany's off. What about the...
and 21 states in this country.
In other words, give you the option. Is that what you're saying?
Give you the option.
So here's a woman who ran into the entire bureaucracy of the whole school system because her kid didn't have his card. You know, I mean, the kid is 4 years old and he's got to have a card.
Bill, a democratic society is a complex venture, and I don't know a simple solution.
Yeah, but you
to
doctors
give
are not
individual
democratic.
freedom. Wait a minute. To give individual freedom
All
and
right, I
also
want to get
protect,
you in here just one second.
and also protect folks. In
Dr.
Great
Morris,
Britain,
give me your pertussis speech, your briefest speech.
Dr. Cooper said something that's very important. There's been no improvement in pertussis vaccine for 40 years. There has been no effort on the part of the government to enforce this improvement until recently, following that pertussis program that was broadcast by within recent months. Following that, I just said before I came here, a notice in my mail. The government is now setting up an organization to improve the pertussis vaccine. That was forced upon them by that broadcast, as your broadcast will force them to do something too. And when Bob Mendelson says that the doctor does not inform the dangers associated with the use of this vaccine, that will force this to be done.
And you can also get DT, can't you?
Yes.
You can. In other words, is that an option? I assume that depends on the legislation in the states at which the request is made.
That's an option.
Well, it's an option, but the government itself admits that the DT vaccine probably isn't any good.
All right, I'm running a little long here. I promise we'll give you a chance. Honest, doctor, we're real good to doctors on this program. But I have Wilma Gundy here. Mrs. Gundy developed Guillain-Barré syndrome after receiving the swine flu vaccine 6 years ago. She's the person who responded to the Ford administration's call, the swine flu is coming, the swine flu is coming, we have to get vaccinated, and she did. She is one of literally thousands of people who contracted this disease, a syndrome, I should call it. And incidentally, more than 100 lawyers in the Justice Department have worked overtime just handling the litigation that was provoked by this.
And we intend to keep them working.
You, yes, you had the shot on November
26, 1976.
And when did you first feel numbness?
I started feeling numbness 3 weeks and 1 day later, on the 22nd day. All at once, my feet and legs and hands and arms began to turn numb.
Okay, now we're not trying to scare you to death, but we have to get this in, Dr. Cooper. Certainly, Mrs. Gundy steps forward as dramatic evidence to the fact that the medical community, even abetted by the President of the United States and an august panel of immunologists and clinicians and researchers, does not necessarily in every case make the right decision. It certainly appears, first of all, we didn't even have any swine flu. We didn't need the vaccine in the first place. The numbers and the research that went into suggesting that it was coming were flawed. And now steps forward this tax-paying American to say, why should I believe anything?
Plus, I was not given any information about the amount of benefits versus the risks. When I finally did some research on my own, I found out I had actually 28 chances in 1,000 of having any benefits at all from the vaccine. And they did not tell me about the risks that were involved. They did not tell me that I might develop a neurological disorder at all. They particularly, and this is where I think that they were most faulted, routinely the drug companies sent a flyer to the doctors with the vaccine that people who were allergic to feathers should not take this vaccination. I was never given that information.
All right.
Well, people who take the measles vaccine aren't given the information that the measles vaccine can lead to mental retardation, that the German measles vaccine can lead to arthritis.
Yes, but in some people, yeah. All right, let's see how much sense we can make here with an audience that has more than just a single question for all of you, and I'll give you that chance. Immunology, vaccinations. You know, our kids today, DPT, measles, polio, rubella, and if you're not confused enough, here come the folks saying maybe aspirin shouldn't be given to children when they have a fever because of Reye's syndrome. I'll tell you, being a parent today is an outright act of courage, and we hope you'll join us.
I went yesterday to the library when I found out what the topic would be today to find out what I could on immunizations and the dangers. I could find nothing in Reader's Guide periodicals, which would be the magazine articles on the dangers. The only time I've ever heard anything was through the media, and it was the DPT scare, which petrified me. I thought I had killed my child with an immunization. And we don't know what turn. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. You don't know what's the answer. Yes or no?
Well, I will be happy to send you and anyone else who wants it a free copy of my newsletter that deals with the risks of immunizations, that gives articles from inside the medical journals, which I agree with you are not generally available to the public.
Dr.
I am recommending now that if there's any person in this audience who decides to give their kid a DPT shot, the least they can do is to write down, when the kid gets the shot, the name of the manufacturer, the expiration date, and the batch number, so that in case something happens later on, they won't get into the situation that you got into. At least they'll know who the hell to sue.
Dr. Cooper, please.
Yeah, well, doctor, just how are you going to find that out? The
doctor's got the box there.
That's right, and I have never seen the doctor show me the box or the bottle. Or how do you find that out?
Wisconsin is just one of the states that obliges the recording of the particular lot number and the manufacturer. So we're getting smart. We're slow, but
what do we do in
Illinois?
Illinois?
You just talk to that doctor and you say, I insist that you record this, and believe me, it is important.
Yeah.
Well, there are a couple of issues. First of all, almost half the vaccine given in this country is given in public programs. It's now the law that anyone who gets a vaccine in a public program has to be given this pamphlet called Important Information About Vaccines.
Yeah, but you got to have a magnifying glass to read it, I bet.
No, well, you can't read it, but you can't read it.
No, his point is that you can read it.
Everyone is handed and must receive important information about the vaccines, which includes the risks and the benefits.
Mrs.
I would suggest that you ask your pediatrician
Bill, this
for
is
information.
This is the crux. The private physician does not have to give you this.
Right.
And this is why I'm saying it should be a mandate from the federal level that everybody must record.
For instance, I had similar information. Did me no good at all.
Right before I started kindergarten, when I was 5, I was given the shots that you're supposed to be given, including the measles. And a little while after I got the measles shot, I developed this thing. My hands would just freeze up in terrible pain, and I would wake up crying. And I remember my mother and I soaking them in water and things. And a doctor only after this happened that's when he told me that this could be a side effect. We never knew before.
Yeah, but obviously you sustained no brain damage. So, but Dr. Mendelson wants you to know that you came awfully close to the possibility. That's what he said.
You sure did. And I have to tell you, you've learned a good lesson, which I can't tell you how happy I am is being transmitted today to the entire American population, because the doctors haven't told people the truth about DES or ultrasound or X-ray.
Okay, all right, please don't, let's...
They're getting the truth as a result today about immunizations.
Yeah, let me just get one more guest in here. Meet Emily Yankovic. Mrs. Yankovic is the mother of Abra, who is how old?
She's 3 and a half, Abra.
Abra. Abra cannot be with us today because apparently she sustains episodic seizure.
Yes, Abra was normal up till the age of 4 months, and she had her second DPT. And as her parents...
We have a photograph here around the area. Oh, yes.
That photograph is when Abra was normal yet, when she was about 3 months old. And she had had 1 DPT already, and apparently she was all right. We assumed that she was all right. It wasn't until her second DPT that we noticed that there was obviously a problem. On the very day she had her DPT shot, she had a seizure. We didn't know it was a seizure, but we knew something was wrong because she was turning blue and shaking, and she was obviously in distress. And so it was my only child, our first child. But I still knew something was wrong, so we rushed to the emergency room, and by the time we got there, she was all right. We told the doctor that she had had her DPT. Was there any connection? He said, it looks like just a choking incident. From that point on, for the next 9 months, we told every doctor we saw, neurologists included, that she had had her DPT. We felt there was a connection. Well, for 2 weeks after that initial reaction from our daughter, we didn't see anything. We didn't see anything. There may have been something. But 2 weeks later, she had grand mal seizures, and she was in critical state for 48 hours. And to this day, Abra, like Sunday, she had 50 seizures. And she has as many as hundreds of seizures a day. And she is very heavily drugged. She can't walk. She can't talk. She can't even chew. But she is very responsive. That picture...
And you would not guess that, looking at that.
She's very responsive to people. And she has full motor use. But her brain isn't making the connection that she can use them. So she doesn't walk. And she doesn't talk. And she's thoroughly disabled.
Have you sued anybody?
We have a case.
It's pending.
Yes.
Okay, now let's get...
Something I'd like to say.
Yeah, can you imagine how thrilled all the pharmaceutical companies are with this? Now, here's the problem. Let's just try, let's try and be responsible here. There's no doubt, nobody's here to say that you're not, that the roulette wheel doesn't spin when you take when you accept a vaccine. The question is, what provides the greatest, there's all kinds of questions. What provides the greatest common good? How much is the medical community sharing information with each other about possible problems? How much does the inevitable interest of the pharmaceutical industry weigh in the decision on the part of the physician to administer these? Why does it have to be a law? Should we have the freedom to decide whether or not? And for the sake of Dr. Cooper and those who think that we've come a long way to eradicate problems of diseases, here are 3 mothers who wish they had had the immunization available to them at the time of the first mother is the mother of a child with measles. Obviously, the fever must have gone up and brain damage. The other 2 mothers you will see on this tape were exposed to rubella during pregnancy. This is sad, but this is the other side of this coin. Roll tape.
She has brain damage from the measles, and we don't think that she'll ever improve.
The rubella vaccine came 4 years too late for us.
For a woman to have a child like this today is senseless tragedy. For herself, for her family, for everyone involved in contact with her.
All right, the last 2 children then were victimized by the mother's exposure to rubella during pregnancy. The first child had measles. So now what?
There's so many things here. When my husband and I talk about this, we realize that vaccinations will always be given. We feel that's a fact. But we were uninformed as parents. We went into the doctor's office like every other mother. I have dozens of friends who have babies, and they all went in and got their shots, but not one of them knew there could be devastating results either from the disease or from the vaccine. So I went in ignorant. I knew nothing about the possible side effects. And we didn't have the option of making the decision as parents, pro and con. We would like to have had the facts and made the decision as the parents of our daughter and lived with the consequences then. If we had decided on the vaccine, we would live with the consequences.
But there must be real anger about that ignorance. That's what really enrages you.
Yes, because we know there's cases like was just shown that they have side effects from the disease itself. But we feel, too, that there are many, many more children who are affected adversely than anyone ever knows. We have been in dozens of hospitals, and we have seen children on these children's floors with seizures, learning disabilities, and no one knows why, but even a nurse told us this. She told us that her child had seizures after the DPT, but she didn't even know that there could be such a reaction until we told her. Yeah. So this is how we feel.
There are also reports, which these are reports, that there are pediatricians who are giving DPTs and not giving them to their children, or administering DPTs and taking the P out of the DPT for their own children. We'll be back in just a moment.
Was tragedy for herself, for her family, for everyone involved in contact with her.
We're back. Yes, ma'am. You'll stand.
Yes, I know I can have empathy for the lady with her son, but my son had polio, and he got polio in November '56. January '57, the Salk vaccine came out, and I'm sorry it was too late for him, but it's devastating. And I know that some people say, well, they got a mild case of polio with the vaccine, but it was nothing like the paralysis.
That's your son?
And that my son was lucky. He had many operations, and he's all right now. But even like penicillin can help some people, and someone else can have a reaction.
Well, excuse me, there's no way that we would say all vaccines should be done away with. It's just that I think the public needs to be informed. We need to be told the benefits versus the risk. We need to know what we're facing.
Well, the darker side of the polio vaccine, and what nobody knows, is that Jonas Salk has pointed out that in the last 10 years in this country, 2/3 of all the cases of polio have been vaccine-induced.
How many cases is that, Bob? How many cases, Bob?
Would you not interrupt me for a second? I know that doctors are used to interrupting patients, but not another doctor.
Absolutely, especially another doctor. Chief,
I think, but let's get. He does make a point that we should also say Sabin is live and live vaccine, and Salk is
inactive.
Is inactive, as we say in the laboratory. All right. How many was it? They ask.
Well, how many people know that the European epidemic of polio, there were about 20 or 30 cases in this country. Now, of course, the American doctors will argue that the reason why polio disappeared in this country was because of the vaccine. But then why did it disappear in Europe in the 1940s and the 1950s without mass vaccination? Why doesn't it occur in the third world where only 10% of the people have ever been immunized against polio or anything else?
So, in other words, we may be fighting a tiger that died.
That's quite correct.
Ask the people in Great Britain. Ask the people in Japan who have their pertussis.
Back here. Gentlemen, if you please. I've got probably the smartest audience we've ever had.
I have a question. How long a delayed action, if any, would you connect this with, like MS?
Is MS a possibility? Would multiple sclerosis be one of the possible results?
As a matter of fact, there's a new publication that just came out from John Hoffman, who's a close associate of Tony Morris's, that gives the references linking MS in later life to the early introduction of live virus vaccines like measles and like some of the others that are live viruses. Now, at the present time, I would recommend that anybody who has MS or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or any of those degenerative neurologic conditions of later life, carefully review their vaccine histories.
I would also like to comment to that, because in connection with my case, I've been doing some research.
Let me tell him once again, Ms. Gundy, that you are a Guillain-Barré victim contracted following your receipt of the swine flu vaccination in 76.
And I am in the process of writing a book about my experience, and in the process I've done considerable research. And from what I have learned, it looks as if immunizations frequently cause autoimmune diseases, not only Guillain-Barré syndrome, but lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and other types of
Yes.
things. Now, I have no data at this point to
We
back
should
that
also
up.
also say that there's a good deal of evidence suggesting that multiple sclerosis may be the result of distemper in an animal that the victim received during childhood. Now, none of this is absolutely nailed to the wall. But that's the problem with this. What's a mother to do with all of these balls in the air and nobody really certain?
I would just like to also comment that we had 46 million people vaccinated with the swine flu shot. And I have written to Ralph Nader's organization. I have written to some of the government organizations trying to get them to do a survey, an ongoing survey, to see if these vaccinations do cause autoimmune diseases or what the reactions are. I can't even get a response because I'm not a doctor, I have no clout, I'm a nobody.
Mrs. Grant, why were you shaking your head?
Phil, it isn't only with that vaccine, it's with all vaccines.
Yes.
They are not interested in the adverse reactions. As a matter of fact, if I may, I'd like to invite anyone to write to me if they've had an adverse reaction. I'd like to help the government because they don't want to know, but I would like to know.
I am a mother of 3 children, and I have been informed and I've read up on these things. And I chose not to vaccinate my children, but when they get to school, why is it that I have to fight for my rights as a mother and the choice I've made?
Let me just quickly, we're long, but that's a very important question. Here are the states in which you either have the totally free decision about whether or not to vaccinate, or we're calling them loophole states, states where they're not going to send your child to solitary if you don't have his card, you know? All right, California, not all children must be immunized in these states. Some require religious reasons. Some places there is a bureaucratic humma you have to go through to prove that you're this or that, and others it's probably easier. So just for the sake of simplifying this, Colorado, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. If your state is not on there, it means that your child is going to be left at the kindergarten door feeling very, very much an outcast because he didn't get his immunization shots. And we'll be back in a moment.
I would like to say that I think it's the American people's responsibility that they should ask the doctor and the nurses before any injection is given to the child. Should it be given or should it not? The doctors don't have time to tell you. You should ask.
The doctors what?
I'm a registered nurse, and I don't think the doctors have a lot of time to go in and say, this is all the things that can happen to your child. I think they should say that it's the mother's responsibility to say, hey, doctor, I would like to know.
On my last child's DBT shot, I did ask. He was not given a P. He was only given a DT. I was not given an answer as to why the P was taken out, nor was I given an answer as to what are the chances of whooping cough, and can it be cured if my child got it?
What state?
Here.
Phil, I got to jump in.
Yes.
You know, the issue is one of balance and perspective. And we shouldn't forget there were 50-some thousand cases of polio in 1955. And this year, Bob didn't answer the question. There are 7 cases of polio in the United States this year. There have been an average of roughly a dozen for the last 6 or 8 years. In Great Britain, they've had over 100,000 cases of pertussis in the last 5 years. 5 or 6% of those cases of pertussis had convulsions. 5,000 kids were hospitalized. Yes, there were more deaths among the less than 1-year-olds than the others.
Right.
There are a couple other points.
Let's also say that Dade County, Florida, South Florida, has sustained of late a measles epidemic. Epidemic means millions. That isn't what it means. There are a significant number of measles cases in Dade County, not the kind of alarming numbers we used to know before the vaccine.
But most of those cases occurred in vaccinated children.
Is that right?
In Dade County.
Because one would be the amateur analyst would conclude that it might have to do with refugees who may not have been inoculated in their home country.
No,
not the case.
no, they're trying to blame it on the refugees, but what Tony Moore said is absolutely correct. I want to ask you one question. Sure. All your statistics, why doesn't the doctor tell that to the patient? Why doesn't the doctor say to them, this is your chance on this side, this is your chance on this side?
Oh, gosh. You know, there's so many hours a day, and we try.
Let me tell you
we
something.
try.
That nurse...
Doctor,
I asked.
yeah.
I specifically
Now, you know, this woman stood up to say the doctor doesn't have time, and you have said there are so many hours in the day. The feeling we get not among all the people in your beloved industry, but among many, is that your job is to do and to push and to wrap things around our arm and to either send us to the hospital or to the drugstore. Your job is not to talk to us, and it's that attitude that's making life so miserable for your whole industry today.
Bill, absolutely.
Phil, I think you're right. We have to have doctors who both talk with patients and listen to them. And one of the things we try to train our pediatricians in training is that their most important job is educating parents to be competent parents. That includes all this.
Well, you try, but you don't succeed.
Yes.
I sounded earlier in the show about Reye's syndrome and aspirin, and I think I'd really like to hear more about that because my children are of an age now where they're getting fevers from school and so forth, and it's really of concern.
We've got very little time, and we're going to start another fight, but we're going to do it. And we'll do that in just a moment. Recently, there's been, I should say that's your, we should give them the pop on that. That's the dissatisfied parents together, DPT, not surprisingly, that's box 563. This is your effort to encourage those who feel that they might have sustained family crisis because of vaccination to communicate with each other. 1377 K Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C. The zip is 20005. Obviously, there's a lot, you get a lot more done if you've got a crowd out in front of City Hall.
Anyone can write to me also. I'd be happy to hear from them, especially if you've had adverse reactions.
Well, as a matter of fact, the next time they come to you and ask for a contribution for the American Heart Association or the American Cancer Society, we should tell them that we're going to give our contributions to your organization instead.
That's great.
Let me, they're going to love you for that. Let me give us your briefest speech regarding Reye's syndrome and its possible link with the aspirin ingestion during fever in childhood.
Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics today is trying to get out from under. They're trying to say that there's no link between aspirin and Reye's syndrome because they're so scared of lawsuits that might come up. As far as I'm concerned, I advise you and every other parent to pay attention to the media today because their reports on Reye's syndrome are more accurate than those of the medical journal.
Okay, but what do you do if that's a cheap shot? The members of the Academy have spent hundreds of hours trying to look at the information relating to Reye's syndrome and whether or not aspirin may play a causal role. The answers aren't completely in yet, and what pediatricians have been advised to do is to tell their parents to be prudent about the use of aspirin. Most of the aspirin that we use for children isn't really necessary. The answers aren't in. We're doing the best we can to get a clearer picture. In the meantime, be prudent.
Here's the problem, though, Dr. Cooper. It is not absolutely clear that you are doing the best you can to find out whether there's a link. That we really don't. We really are terribly disorganized in every sense in this country. We've got a fragmented country, so it's kind of hard to be indignant about your discipline, but I don't think you're any different. The problem with you is that when you're not together, we hurt more because of the potential damage of not sharing. CDC in Atlanta may or may not be talking to people. How many statistics are being gathered? How many blind studies are being... How much information is coming into
Not enough, Phil, not enough.
Well, there was enough evidence on Reye's syndrome.
Once more, we've got another doctor coming forward and saying, we're doing our best, be prudent.
Hey, we need to do more, Phil, and this public has to ask for more, and this public has to tell its legislators they can't cut funds.
And we need more doctors who are not quite as defensive, who are open to the improvements that have to be made.
Of course we do.
Dr. Moore.
The evidence that was presented to Secretary Schweiker as to the relationship between aspirin and Reye's syndrome convinced him that there should be a label on aspirin. The pharmaceutical company got together and lobbied and did away with that notification. So as of now, Secretary Schweiker has backed away from that position that he took after hearing the evidence.
Is the caller there?
Yes.
Not much time.
Yes. I would like to say, first of all, that I am terrified at the fact that learning that after the third shot, the one woman's boy got the symptoms of having neurological damage. I felt that with my 8.5-month-old daughter, that once she got the first shot and she was fine, that I was safe, that she wasn't going to have any problem. I'm surprised to hear that this could happen next time she gets a shot. Do the chances get less as the child gets older, or what? Do I have to go through this fear all the time?
You're talking about Emily Yankovic, yeah.
Right.
With this, our daughter, it happened after the second shot, but it can happen after any immunization. There's even evidence that problems can show up later in life, but they're not proven statistics, and so there's nothing that we can say for sure, but you have to be aware of that. And also, if your children have if there's any history of central nervous system disorders in the family, any neurological problems in the family, or any seizures in the family, a child should never get pertussis.
Thank you.
I just want to know, instead of aspirin, should we give our children Tylenol? Will that prevent, is there that big of a difference?
Bob, I'm afraid I don't have the time for you to answer that entirely. And we'll be back in just a moment.